Good morning. Today is Friday, August 2nd, 2024. Vayidaber Moshe el Roshei Hamatos Livnei Yisrael Lemor. Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes of the Jewish people as follows. Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem. This is the mitzvah that God is commanding. Ish ki yidor neder laHashem, o hishava shvua le'asar yisar al nafsho. A person who makes an oath or a promise, lo yachel dvaro. So let's leave that aside and not translate that yet. Lo yachel dvaro. Kachol hayotze mipiv yaseh. A person should fulfill every word that comes out of their mouth. What does lo yachel devaro mean? Well, the simple meaning is lo yachel devaro, don't break your word. Keep your word. If you make a promise or you swear an oath, keep your word. But that would mean that the verse is duplicative, because the Torah follows that with the words kachol hayotz mipiv yaseh. Every word that comes out of your mouth you should fulfill. So presumably, the words before that, lo yachel dvaro, must mean something additional to keeping your word. Rashi says, commenting on this word yachel, lo yaseh dvaro chulin. Don't make your words chulin. Now that word chulin, which is connected to the word chol, that has many different meanings. The Gemara understands, the Talmud says that what chulin and chol mean in this context is, don't make your words empty. In other words, any promise or oath, especially if it mentions God's name with it, we are extremely hesitant. And we have a general rule, and this is the first paragraph in the laws of oaths and vows. Don't swear oaths. Don't do it. It's better not to do it at all. The possibility, no matter how remote, of taking God's name in vain if you don't fulfill it. But if you use God's name in connection with an oath and then you don't do it, you have unnecessarily used God's name. You have profaned God's name, and that's a terrible, terrible sin. So the first meaning is, don't defile your words by having it turn out that you have used God's name in vain. The Talmud goes on to say that there's another meaning of lo yaseh dvaro chulin, don't make your words chol. It is prohibited to make a promise if the promise or the statement is unnecessary, even if it's true. That too is taking God's name in vain. If a person were to say, I would never say this, but if a person were to use God's name as part of an oath that the sun is shining where I am right now, that is also taking God's name in vain because it's unnecessary. Everyone can see that the sun is shining here where I am right now. So it's unnecessary for me to swear such an oath, which I would never do. So using God's name in a way that is unnecessary is also a way of taking God's name in vain, and also is part of the meaning of making our words chulin, making them meaningless, not just false, but unnecessary, meaningless. Dr. Neil Postman writes how applicable this is to our society today. We are flooded with disinformation, not only in the form of lies, but in the form of noise, out of place, scattered, non-relevant, superficial information that creates the illusion of knowing, but actually keeps us away from knowing. During a television show, for example, the participants are not granted the option to ask, "What do you mean when you say?" Or, "Let me think about it," or, "I don't know." There is not much to show on television when we think. It's a problem. Thinking is not photogenic. To which God admonishes us, Lo yachel dvaro. Don't make your words empty. Think about what you're going to say. Don't say something just to fill the time. It's a very important lesson. And the lesson is that words have value. Words have meaning, significant. They have an impact. There are consequences to our words. So, for sure, we should not speak false words, but also we should not speak empty words, unnecessary words. And that's why our sages tell us so many times that usually silence is best. If only we could learn that. But there's a deeper meaning of this that I want to share with you, and it comes from a sefer titled Mishpatzei Shlomo. Because the word chulin, where Rashi says, don't make your words chulin, that has another deeper connotation. Because chulin is a contrast to kodesh. There is kodesh, holy, sanctified. And then the opposite of that is chulin, unsanctified, not holy. We might use the translation mundane, but that's not exactly what I'm getting at here. I'm looking at the spectrum between holy to kodesh to chulin, sanctified to unsanctified. Just for example, in the Talmud, there are two different volumes. There's a volume called Chulin, which is the volume, the tractate of Talmud that deals with the slaughter of animals and making animals kosher for our everyday usage. And then there's a parallel volume called Zvachim, which is the same topic of preparing the correct slaughter of animals for holy purposes, for karbanos, for sacrifices in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. So there are two parallel tracks where the actions might have certain similarities, but there's a gigantic difference between holiness and a lack of holiness. And we have a rule when we discuss Kedusha or Kudshim and Chulin. Kudshim, sanctified objects, cannot be used for chol, cannot be used for everyday use. If a person had an animal and they designated this animal that they intend to bring this animal as a sacrifice, from that moment, I'm not allowed to use the animal for any mundane purpose. I'm not allowed to use it to carry a burden or to do work in the field. Because it's sanctified, it cannot be used for a personal purpose. Chulin, likewise, cannot be used for kudshim. If I want to bring a karban to the Beit HaMikdash, a sacrifice, I'm not allowed to just take one of my flocks, an animal from my flock, and use it as a sacrifice. I have to sanctify it. I have to designate it. I have to inspect it and check it to make sure that it is fitting to use as a sacrifice. Now, I want to make it clear, there is nothing inherently wrong or bad about chulin, about non-sanctified objects. That is our normal life. We live mostly within the world of unsanctified objects. However, to take kudshim, to take something that is sanctified, and to put it into a receptacle that is chulin, that's prohibited. Or to take chulin, something that is unsanctified, and to put it into a kli shares. A kli shares is a utensil that has been designated to be used for holiness, and you put something mundane in it, that's prohibited. If a person takes you come to shul and you're carrying your overcoat, and you bring it into shul, and you want to put it down. Okay, the first lesson is you should not bring your overcoat into the shul. Go to the coat room and put it away. It's not proper to bring overcoats into the shul. Okay, but you did it. You brought your coat in. So now you're looking for a place to put it. Oh, here's a place. The Aron Kodesh. I'll just open the doors of the ark and I'll just put my coat in there. Nobody will take it. And then when I'm finished, I'll leave. Don't ever do that. That's a terrible thing to do, because the ark, the Aron Kodesh, is holy. It is the receptacle used to hold the Torah scrolls. To use it for a mundane purpose is prohibited. The utensil becomes defiled from its state of holiness by putting into it a mundane object. Again, there's nothing wrong with a raincoat, with an overcoat. It's not bad. It's just that it doesn't belong inside a receptacle that is meant for holiness. According to Mishpatzei Sa'av, Lo yachel dvaro, don't make your words chulin, means don't allow your words to be unsanctified, because the receptacle of your words, the utensil that holds your words, your mouth, you are a kli shares. You are a sanctified vessel. You, every one of you, every one of us, every person, every one of us is so holy. Our bodies are holy while we are alive because we are connected to God, the source of holiness. We are capable, as human beings, we are capable of that connection to God and that connection to holiness. And therefore, our bodies, ourselves, our mouths should be incapable of contact with words that are mundane, with words that are unholy. That's the meaning, the deepest meaning of Lo Yachel Dvaro. It's a statement, it's not about oaths or promises. It's a statement about the grandeur of human beings. Each one of us is a kli shares, a dedicated vessel, a utensil set aside for holiness. And we should see ourselves as holy and connected to God all the time. And therefore it would be improper for ourselves, for our mouths, to hold words that are lacking in any kind of holiness because they're untrue or even because they're unnecessary. I've shared with you many times before the lessons and teachings of Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twerski. He was a great Torah scholar and teacher, a psychologist. He devoted much of his life to treating those who are afflicted with the disease of addiction, drug, alcohol, other kinds of addictions. And he wrote a work about stories from his childhood titled Generation to Generation. It is a wonderful book. I have quoted it to you so many times. So here's a passage that he writes. He's talking about raising children and the way that he was raised as a child. He grew up in a Hasidic family. He was a Hasidic Jew, and he grew up in a Hasidic family. So he writes, perhaps the greatest single challenge facing parents is to raise their children with values, with the knowledge of what is right and wrong, and with the desire to do what is right and to avoid what is wrong, while at the same time promoting the development of positive self-concept, not making the child feel that he or she is bad if they've done something wrong. So this requires discipline, and discipline demands that a child be aware that something that he or she does or has done is not acceptable. It's not permissible. That's what discipline means. But how do you do this without making the child feel guilty or somehow bad? Because that's the opposite of what we want. So listen to what he says. One of the few memories I have as a child of being disciplined by my father was his telling me in a quiet, firm, no-nonsense tone, "Es passt nicht. Es passt nicht. It doesn't become you. It's not fitting for you to do." So he writes, Dr. Twerski writes, "The message was clear. I knew that what I had done was something that I should not do. But it was not until many years later," he writes, "that I appreciated the full content of what his father was saying. Es passt nicht meant I am too good for that. This is the opposite of a put down. There's no mention that what I had done was wrong or bad. Rather, the emphasis was on me. I am above such behavior." Now listen to what he says. Because then he moves from his childhood memory of how his father disciplined him to reflecting on his decades of professional experience in treating those with addictions. "Today I sit in my office and a young man or woman of 16 or 17 is brought in for treatment of a drug abuse problem. And questioning elicits that for several years this beautiful child has been putting these harmful substances into his or her body. And he asks them, 'Tell me, what will you do if you're working in the kitchen and you accumulate garbage? Where do you put the garbage?' Invariably, there is a puzzled look. 'Well, in the garbage can, of course. Where else?' And then Dr. Twerski says, 'Then tell me, my child, how is it that you have been putting all of this drug garbage into yourself?' He writes, 'It has never yet failed. The tears well up, and these lovely children tell me that they had never felt good about themselves. Essentially, they saw nothing inappropriate in putting garbage into themselves because they felt that they were a garbage can.'" That's the message from our Parsha, Lo Yachel Dvaro. Don't say something false or empty because you are holy. You are capable of excellence. And garbage should not be placed into a holy vessel. Our mouths, our bodies, we're capable of excellence. And we are above unnecessary words. Lo Yachel Dvaro. My friends, I wish you a good day and a beautiful Shabbos. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.